All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. We're talking databases, and in particular, I'm talking to people about, we're about to start MySQL by examples for beginners. All right, before we do, I just want to mention that I found this site looking for other things, and this is on codeconquest.com. It's a blog of the top 50 websites to learn MySQL. Now, is it the best thing that I've ever seen on this? No, but it's good and it has some really good references in it. So if you have an interest, that'd probably be something worth checking out. Now what we're going through in here with this MySQL tutorial, that's what's right here. All right, and I'm going to keep showing this every time as long as I remember to do so. Okay, now I've done earlier lectures where I've explained to people how, if you want to, you can go out to Apache friends.org and find XAMPP. There are other products like XAMPP. XAMPP is sometimes called XAMPP, but it's a combination of Apache, MariaDB, which is the free version of MySQL, PHP, and Perl. And depending on whether or not you have Windows, a Windows box, a Linux box, or an Apple box or Mac box. No, I'm working on Windows, so I'd click right here. Just walk through the steps. All right. What this does basically is it allows you to create the equivalent of a server on your own machine. So in other words, you can use your own machine as both a client and a server. That's putting it in very general or generic terms. Okay? All right. So let's jump into this. Once you get into MySQL, and let me get out and get back in again. So I'm going to exit. And from here, there's actually two ways that you can get into this. All right. One way is from where I am right here. When this comes up, this is the XAMPP or XAMPP control panel. All right. I start up Apache, then I start up MySQL. When they both turn green, they're both on, so to speak. And for what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click shell, type in MySQL space -u root. So I'm going in as a root user, and there I am. This is the non-GUI way. If I wanted to do this GUIized, I could go in through admin right here, and this will bring me into PHP MyAdmin, which is a semi-GUIized tool that's going to allow me to do pretty much the same thing. So if I come in here, and let's say, for example, I wanted to bring up the Northwind database. I click there to bring it up. Here it's showing me the different tables that are in here. If I bring up the products table, all right, here are some of my products. Okay, there's 77 products, so there's about 3 pages worth of this. Now I'm not going to do any more with that, at least not right now. When you're all done, you typically click stop, and then quit. All right, but let's take a look at this. Now they tell you the first thing that you should do is run the show databases command. So I'll do that first. Now I've got more databases than they'll discuss in here because I've been doing some work on my own and some work for the class. All right. But at a minimum, when you start this up, you should have an information schema database, a performance schema database, possibly a PHP MyAdmin database, and a test database. So you'll have probably 3 or 4. Now if we look here, a MySQL database server contains many databases. These databases are also known as schemas. And that gives me a chance to bring up a couple more things here. And these couple more things that I'm going to bring up, I'm going to talk about 2 terms. Again, I'll try to keep this simple and not labor on or limber on whatever too much. But the first are database definition language, or DDL commands. And those three commands, I'll just put them in uppercase so they stand out, are create, alter, and drop. All right, there are also database manipulation language, or DML commands. And those are select, update, insert, and delete. So why am I even telling you this? Because when you're working with the database directly, not working with the data that's in the database, and we'll get to that momentarily, but when you're working with the database, what's referred to as the database schema, you're using create and alter and drop. So for instance, when I want to use create, I have to say what I'm creating. So I have to say create table, or create database, or create view. If I want to alter something, I have to say alter database, or alter table, or alter view. If I want to get rid of something, I have to say drop database, drop table, or drop view. But when I'm working with the data, I use select, update, insert, and delete. You put these three letters together, they spell CAD. I know that sounds kind of dumb, but it's a way that I remember them. If I use this, S-T-U-P-I-D, it spells stupid. All right? So I just showed you the show databases command. What we're going to create in here is a database that's named Southwind. Why Southwind? Well, if I come in here and I Google the Northwind database, that's a database that was created, I believe, by Microsoft. Now, this is a database that has a lot of what are called tables in it. This is one database with, I don't know, it's somewhere around 13 tables. So you can see each of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, each of the 13 tables. All right? And you can see each of the fields in each one of the tables. You'll notice that some of those fields have a little gold key next to them, which means that those fields are what are referred to as a primary key. A primary key, keep it simple, a unique record identifier. So every supplier has their own ID. Every category has its own ID, etc. Well, this is the Northwind database. All right, so we're going to create the Southwind database. Okay? So, as far as creating this, again, I'm going to run through everything that's in here. So we're going to look at each one of these. So let me bring this up, and I'm going to cut down my size, at least momentarily, or cut down my width, so you can see everything that I'm doing here. So the first one says create database Southwind, but if you look, if I show my databases, I've already got a Southwind. So I'm just to make it easy, I'm going to create a Southwind 2. So I'm going to type in create database Southwind. Notice if I did Southwind, I get an error message. It says it already exists. But I can come in and create Southwind 2, and that'll work. But a couple of things before we do this. First thing, the words create and database are keywords, which is why they're in uppercase. They don't have to be. All right? MySQL is a case-insensitive language, as you'll see as we go on. So that says, right there, with that first line that we put in, we attempted to create an existing database. Okay? And since it already existed, we got an error message. But if we attempt, again, if we show our databases, you'll notice we do not have a Southwind 2. There is no Southwind 2 in there. So if I attempt to create a database, so I'm just going to put in here, create database, Southwind 2, it worked. When it says one row affected, typically it worked. So now if I show my databases, not only do I have a Southwind, but I have a Southwind 2. So that's the create database command. So that's an example. That's an example right there of using one of the data definition language commands. If I don't want the database anymore, I can use another one of the data definition language commands. Drop database, Southwind2. Now if I try to show my databases again, you'll notice that Southwind2 is gone. All right. Not only can I create the database, but I can say create database if not exists Southwind2. All right. Before I do that, though, let's remove this. And notice I don't have a Southwind. So I'm going to try to drop Southwind. I'm going to try to drop a non-existing database. Drop database Southwind2, which does not exist. You notice I get a message. Can't drop it, it doesn't exist. But if I say drop database if exists Southwind2, now notice it doesn't give me an error, but it gives me a warning. So if I show my warnings, it says can't drop it, it doesn't exist. I can also tell it to create database if not exists Southwind2. So again, two things. Keywords I'm putting in capital letters as the author does. Non-keywords like anything I'm creating are not in capital letters. And virtually everything that I do here, virtually everything that I do will have a semicolon at the end. So now let's see if I show my databases. There's Southwind2. Okay. All right. Now notice I can say show create database. If I issue a command that starts with show, what it will do is it will show me the command that I just put in. So I'm going to type that in. Show create database Southwind. Show create database Southwind. Let's try it first without the \G. So Southwind2 in our case. And it shows it to you. Now, that's not bad. Sometimes if you have a very narrow screen, you can't read all of it. So if I run the same command and at the end I put \G in there, okay, it does the same thing, but it tries to put it in a little more friendly, easier to read format. All right. And if you look in here where it's got default character set, Latin 1, etc., those are just literally using default values specified by MySQL. All right. Now notice what it says here. It's got create database Southwind, and it's got it in what are called backticks. These things right here and right here. Those are also called grave accents, and they're right underneath your escape key that's in the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard. If you decide, and what I'm about to show you is a very bad practice, but what if I wanted to create a database, and I wanted to call that database, so I wanted to type in here, create database, but I wanted, instead of Southwind, I wanted it to say Southwind 3, for example. Well, I get an error message because I can't create a database like that that has a blank space in it. But if I create that and I put Southwind 3 inside of backticks, then notice it worked. So if I show my databases, there's Southwind 3. Now, most of the time, I would highly recommend that you do not put stuff, do not put blank spaces in anything. So if I really wanted to create that database and I wanted it to have a blank space in it, instead of putting in a blank space, I'd put in something like this. And again, doing that with the underscore, I would not need the backticks. They never hurt to put them in, but you don't have to put them in. Again, they're also called grave accent characters. All right, that's explained a little bit in here. I don't want to sit there and read what the author says. To me, it's always very boring if somebody goes and starts going through something for you and they just read what's on a screen. All right. If I decide I want to put comments in what I'm working on, so notice if I put in here, this is a comment. All right. It didn't do anything because it's a comment. It's ignored by the system. I can also put in this. I think it's 2 minus signs. This is a comment also. All right. So if I'm writing a lot of code and I decide that I want to comment it while I'm working, this is a way that I can do it. All right. So now I've come in here, and if we show our databases again, we have Southwind 2, but you'll notice here it says MariaDB none. What that means is none of the databases are currently active. In order to make a database active, I have to use the use command to make it active. So if I type in here use Southwind 2, notice how this changes from none to Southwind 2. So when I type in use followed by the name of the database, it makes that database active. So if I typed in here use test, which you can see I've got a database here called test, it changes to test. But I want Southwind 2. Okay, you might notice too I'm using DOS key, which means that underneath my shift key in the lower right hand corner of my keyboard, I've got the up and down arrow keys and the left and the right arrow keys. Okay, that's DOS key. All right, so I've now got my database and I've made it active. That's good. So now I want to come in here and I want to create a table. And as soon as I create it, I'm going to come in and I'm going to drop it right away. All right, so we've gone through and we've started talking about how to create the database. Let's leave it right here and we'll pick it up in the next portion talking about creating and deleting tables.